All right, so
25.
whatever. So tonight we're gonna be debating Platonism. We got a big debate. We got Flo versus Fleur, and the relevant moderator and the judge will be 10. Oh wait, Tron, are you back?
I'm back. My bucket,
Yeah,
Tron,
computer,
give me
Tron,
5
are
seconds.
you?
bucket fell. All right, I'm going with 25
Tron,
minutes. I'm going with 25
yo,
minutes.
Yeah.
Tron, you here?
Yeah.
Are you good with judging Fleur versus Flo on Platonism?
Um. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, and then y'all can start debating. So this will be a 25-minute debate versus Fleur and Flo. The relevant moderator and judge will be Tron, and Fleur will be taking the affirmative view on
Wait.
Platonism. You guys can get
I
into it.
I
What
think
is it?
I think I'm too intoxicated to judge.
All right, we're just gonna let 10 do it.
Okay, so well, let's into it. Anyway, so,
Alright.
all right, do you want me to just give like a description of what I mean by Platonism, followed by
Yeah,
an
you can give
argument?
like a little amount of description on it. Go ahead.
Okay, Platonism minimally is just the view that there are some abstract objects. So as long as one abstract object exists, Platonism is true. By abstract objects, I mean objects that are non-spatial, non-temporal, non-mental, non-physical. They're usually defined by properties they lack. If you want a stronger definition of an abstract object, like a property that an abstract object may have that we would ordinarily not associate with concrete objects, or would differentiate them positively from concrete objects, is the fact that they encode their properties, and that would just mean that there are certain properties they have that are like identical with their individuation. So, for example, when I talk about the number, I'm also going to be talking about all of their number theoretic properties that the number 2 may have, which I think is going to be a abstract object. Now, if you want an argument, I can provide an argument. So,
I just, before you give an argument, 1 second. So your Platonist is basically saying that there exists some abstract objects, not space, not time, and these objects are going to be self-identical to what they are. Their properties, the individuation is going to be trivial in the sense that it's going to be speaking about how the form is going to be what it is by its essence. It's not going to have any process needed. Correct, though?
no, not necessarily as essence. You could, so for example, you could individuate the object through a certain process, but it's not going to be like a temporal process. By process, we could just say something like rational process. So, for example, I think that the way that we individuate abstract objects is through certain types of abstraction principles.
Like those abstraction principles are by what means?
So abstraction principles are certain principles that we might have to identify which abstract objects there are and are not. So there's I don't have a list of all the abstraction principles I'm committed to immediately. But one would be like Hume's principle, right? I can just pull up Hume's principle and then just give it to you.
So I could go against all of this. So one, I'm probably going to get the critique that it's not going to be that which is going to be atemporal. If it's going to be configured as existence, then existence in this sense is not going to be speaking about the minimalistic mode of being, which he said in Logic of Sense in page 10, but it's going to be that for which is going to be within the chronos. That's going to be infinitely subdivided back into the past and the future. That's why I'm going to have to disagree with the atemporality of this abstractions. The identity, when you're speaking about the, I remember you saying this explicitly, so go ahead and tell me if I was wrong, but you were speaking about its properties are going to be, I guess, in this sense, some of its identity for which is going to be constituted. If I'm not mistaken, you are going to be saying that there's certain properties that are identical with its individuation. I think that's going to be a misconception of what I would take of individuation. But I'll explain that in a second. The thing is, I think individuation happens through the intensive processes. That's not going to be the properties, because individuation is not going to be the properties. Just how like Simon Dunn actually kind of discovered, he thinks a thing becomes an individual through its type of immanent conditions, which are going to be the gradients, the tensions, and the intensities, and that's going to give us the processes of resolutions. So it's not going to have any type of fixed predicates. So I would say, instead of having the triangle, and then you get the 3 sides for which that's going to be constituting some type of identity, which the Platonists would have to hold to, I would say that, like, maybe for in this sense, the triangular structure would have to probably emerge from the differential conditions. That's just an analogy right there. I'm going to have to reject
nothing what I said was like, so like nothing what I said that would deny that there are differential conditions for these things to exist. Right. In fact, when we talk about abstraction principles, a lot of abstraction principles appeal to differential conditions. So, for example, like Hume's principle, right? They appeal, like if we just say, for example, the number of f's is the same as the number of g's, the number, if and only if the number of f's and g's are equinumerous, right? That's going to appeal to different entities in some way, right? Conceptually speaking, right? So even if that is the case, you can still imply these, like, even if you hold this like a kind of differential ontology view, you can still imply that there's some sort of entities that may may have this type of encoding relation, or their individuation is going to be identical with them. Now, now another thing you might have said is that, oh well, that they can't be atemporal because by which they exist must so there's two ways I can see this. So for one, right, I can see it meaning in the sense that you mean that there's some sort of like metric time that's required, right? That there's some type of measurable metric time or duration that's required for the thing to exist. And in that sense, maybe I don't think they do require that. I think they were, but I think in the case of like non-metric time, right? In cases where there's not like a necessarily measurable time being discussed, or some type of measurable or some set of duration being implied, then it could be the case that actually these abstract objects do exist, right? And I'm also committed to the thesis of permanentism, which is that there's never a time when permanency does not exist. Right? So if you're
wait, you said permanent what? Say that on something?
Permanentism. I don't think there's ever a time.
Permanent. There's never a time where X does not exist, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So X. Okay. So okay, okay. If that's all, then yeah, I got a lot of your views. So I can actually go against that, even with the Hume's principle. So the Hume's principle, which is going into those relations and the causation and all those things, are going to be external to the terms and can hold between the different entities. That's what you're trying to claim. But I still would say that that's not going to allow the entities in this sense to have the self-sufficient individuals with the fixed identities. So it's going to be, in this sense, it's going to be superficial when you're speaking about it. That's why I was saying, if you're going to have Hume and you're going to have the Gildeleuzian type of view, now I'll say I'll go beyond that, because obviously we agree with the external relations, but it's not enough to explain the individuation of the nature of the entities themselves. And that's what I was trying to explain to you. And also the non-metric time, which abstracts are supposed to exist, that would be the ion. That would be referring to the ion. But I told you the interpretation, how he says it in Logic of Sense, and even what his philosophy did back in, I'm pretty sure it was 1920s with Guattari. Not sure if I'm mistaken. Who knows?
That was definitely not. Logic of Sense was definitely not the 20s.
Oh, it was after that then, huh? It was way more after that, because I forgot. Deleuze was
way after that.
He died 1995, huh? Yeah, okay, maybe I was wrong, but who knows? It doesn't really matter. Even if you go back to page 23 in the book, which I remember, he obviously kind of contrasts his plane of immanence and how the virtuality is not going to be that of the existent realm, but it's going to be that which is going to be non-existent but real. But though, it's not going to have any existent points. So the non-metric time that you're referring to, that's not going to be measurable like the chronos is going to be that which is going to be non-existent.
Wait, by existent, what do you mean? What do you mean by existent?
Oh yeah, so obviously when you're speaking about existence of the Deleuze view, that's going to be held to the realm of the bodies. Obviously, the stratification differentiations that's going to be coagulated is obviously going to be that.
So your view just entails a view of existence where the only types of things that could exist are concrete entities?
Or in the chronos. Concrete. Yes,
that just seems very uninteresting, right? Like I just am talking about existence in a different sense.
Well, okay, but yeah, I'm telling you, that's not a view that I would hold to. That's obviously the divergence. Like that's heterogeneous towards my view. That's what I'm telling you.
Obviously, that's heterogeneous to your view, but do you agree that under my sense of existence, it could still be entailed that these things
well,
exist?
under your conceptual scheme for which the intelligibility of the concepts are going to be encapsulated given your domain description, then sure, you could probably hold that. But I'll probably tell you that under my conceptual schematic, which is obviously going to be critiquing yours from the external
my conceptual
sense,
scheme.
Yes, your conceptual scheme.
Look, one. I don't think you would. I mean, if you're a Deleuzian, you wouldn't accept that there are these these conceptual schemes. I don't think you would really.
No,
accept that.
I'm not saying it's relative conceptual schemes, because we're not saying that.
I'm just merely talking about the affection of what I'm saying, right? The affection of what I'm saying. If we just talk about what's entailed by that, it's still entailed that those things exist.
Yeah, no, under your view, you're going to be entailing some existence parameterization, given the fact that obviously we have some type of gratuitous value, for which obviously you have gratuitous, in the sense that it's.
What does that mean? What does gratuitous mean here?
Hold on, I got you. Don't worry. But like I was trying to say, all I was trying to say is gratuitous in this sense is probably going to be speaking about, obviously you have this complementary way of trying to speak about the entities that's not going to be really necessary, but it's still going to be superficially given. And that's the point. I was trying to tell you that the unformed entity.
I think it's just like much simpler if I just like your notion of existence to talk about necessity in any way that I'm relevantly concerned about, then yeah, I'm talking about necessity in the way that I'm relevantly
When necessity is produced,
Fleur is relevantly concerned about
you
it. Fleur is
pursue
relevantly concerned about this other notion of existence, right? And this other idea of doing ontology, which I think is
Right.
much more compatible with Deleuze's project.
I don't think so. I don't think so. How you make it seem in every talk.
Well, Deleuze partially wants to talk about things being like self-existent in some sense, in the sense that they exist as differential intensities, right? So in that sense, they would still exist. I mean, and you can also take this from difference interpretation, where he directly takes like a formal ontology view, right?
With the formal ontology view, in this sense, for the chronos he's speaking about, is going to be obviously toward the temporary civilization.
Are you beating?
Like what? Like it's.
Yo,
I think it's like
who
very.
is that, bro?
I don't know who
Fleur,
is that.
what you doing?
And also, permanentism. Also, I deny permanentism, by the way. But hold on, I'm not sure if I said this, but the permanentism is not going to go through. I deny that.
Okay, wait 1 second.
For the application, I'm not going to hold
obviously, I would want to hold. I would want to hold like. I'm going to show you why I would hold a permanentist view. But whether or not we hold a permanentist view, I don't think. I mean, you could be a Platonist without being like a permanentist. That's
incompatible with my virtual view.
But look. I'm just talking about like under my notion of existence. Like it's pretty clear that under my notion of existence, right, this thing exists. You haven't really told me why my notion of existence is irrelevant, right? Because I was affirming the proposition in the sense that I was speaking about. You're doing like some type of like semantic imperialism, right? Where you do and you like.
It's always derivative. It's ontologically secondary. I've given that. And you tried to say it's going to be obviously compatible.
Well, ontologically secondary in the sense that they come from these differential intensities.
You're affirming that it's going to have some representational. No, you're going to say it's having some representational primacy, for which that goes for everything, even the genetic.
Oh no! I'm not saying that.
Well, you have actually implied.
I'm just talking about the only primacy it holds is in the fact that I've used it in that way. That's not that. There's not any strong. Like I'm not saying there's not. It's like a proposition, right? I might go on to further say that in like a different conversation. But as far as for the Platonist conversation, the terms I'm using it minimally, right? These things, these things exist in the affections that I'm speaking.
Yeah, in the affections that you're speaking it, I'm obviously giving you a type of disagreement that is speaking about how the individuals at all, for which the identity from the individuation is not going to be that which is going to be presupposing a type of.
Oh.
So obviously, getting permanentism, that would still fail on my account. That's why I'm saying.
Well, obviously, you would think permanentism fails. I mean, look, that's going to be like something that's going to actually support Platonism. Even if you can deny permanentism and still accept Platonism, right? Those are not in contradiction.
That's not. I know they're not mutual.
But also like. We were gonna just like go over like under the idea that I'm talking about existence. I don't even think we ever got an answer, right? Do you agree that under the idea that I talk about things existing, right? My view of Platonism goes through that it's not contradictory.
By the way, you're speaking of it. By the way, you're speaking about it.
I know you don't think that normatively it's relevant, but you're not answering the question.
On the chronos.
I agree that you don't think it's normatively relevant, but you're not answering the question.
No, I'm not talking about it's going to be normatively relevant. I am answering the fucking question. I've given that cognitively useful answer multiple of times. If you keep on speaking,
was that a yes or no?
Actually, it's not.
Was that a yes or no?
Binary. But even if we're going to go into the partition questions, which we don't.
Hey, Fleur, are you close?
About it in this sense, how the entity is going to be acquiring that identity in this sense. So there's going to be a discrete unity.
That's a discrete unity?
Yes, a discrete unity.
Between our theory and your theory.
The individuated as discrete units, it's not going to be able to be shown under your Humean view. That's why I'm telling you. That's why I'm denying that.
When I said Hume's principle, do you think I was talking about like? What do you think I was talking about on the Hume's principle?
I already encapsulated that. Do you want to conclude?
Sure, we can conclude.
And also,
wait, y'all have 5 minutes left.
You didn't go against me saying that I deny all your argumentations, and I went against your argumentation.
Well, look, if I deny my argumentation, you just disagree that you just disagree that my view entails these things.
No, I disagree that you even encapsulated
it seems like you didn't understand much about the view. You kind of just went to ramble on about
argumentation theory, like a preface argumentation theory, which is basically going to be overwhelming all of your type of views. So in that sense, I was going to be saying that obviously the abstract argumentation framework is going to go through, and the preface argumentation framework from the Open University
All right, they both got muted. They both agreed to conclude.
Yeah, they can just get conclusions.
Yeah, so we're
Right.
gonna let the judge 10 give verdict now.
Wait, I thought they were gonna. Okay, sure, whatever. So I mean, I think Flo won because Fleur really never gets like the two Platism or Platism, right, being true, right. At best, all we can say, Fleur kind of gives the definition of Platonism, right? And then he kind of gestures towards these abstractions, these abstraction principles, like David Hume's principle, which obviously never really giving the bridge from we can talk about numbers abstractly to there really are abstract objects that exist mind independently. So the burden obviously was on Fleur because Fleur is making the positive existential claim where there exists at least one abstract object. And obviously, in order for me to even be like motivated to believe that Fleur even won that, I'd have to say Fleur needed to show why abstraction principles are proof makers for what abstract entities like, rather than just like the conceptual tools. But maybe I'm wrong. Tron could give a better judgment later on after he rewatches Rec. But essentially, what Flo was doing, and his point is that Fleur was like smuggling in the stable concrete units there, and he's not defending those things. And when Fleur keeps on saying things like, as I even wrote it down, he keeps on saying the numbers F's like is the same as the number of G's if and only if they are like like equinumerous or whatever, right? That fat ass word that this nigga said. So all that really would show is a relation between collections, right? It doesn't I don't see how that we would go. I don't see how we would go from that to there exists some extra abstract object over and above those collections. So Flo is basically just saying he's just treating abstractions as ontology without explaining why it's even licensed. So I think Fleur also just never really like cashes out permanence or atemporality. Like when you just simply say, oh, there is never time when an entity does not exist. It doesn't really establish that like abstract objects exist. So I mean, Flo was a bit messy, I think, but essentially, and like honestly, like he's so fucking jargon heavy, and it's really unclear some of the things that he says. But I think on the negative burden is he still met it because Flo obviously doesn't need a full rival ontology. I don't think that's the case. Flo really only needs to pressure what Fleur was saying, and Fleur really never justified why abstraction principles generate real entities and why individualism, or not individualism, my bad, but why these things is fixed rather than differential, and why abstract existence is more than conceptual descriptions, right? So that's my judgment. I think Flo won, like mid diff.
Wait, then you obviously point like I was dealing with counter arguments the entire time. Like there was never